Welcome to Sleepy Tales. My name is Mateus, and before we begin today's story, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below saying, "I'll sleep well tonight." Now, sit back, relax, and let's dive into tonight's tale. It was a dark and stormy night when the family arrived at their new home. They had just moved to a remote, old house in the countryside in hopes of starting a new life after the tragic loss of their youngest son. The house was old and worn, with peeling wallpaper and creaky floorboards. But to the family, it was a fresh start, a new beginning. The family consisted of a couple, John and Emily, and their daughter, Sarah. Emily had insisted on the move, believing that a change of scenery would help them all heal from the loss of their son. John, on the other hand, was hesitant. He didn't like the idea of living in an isolated place like this, but he agreed for the sake of his wife and daughter. As they settled in, they quickly realized that something was off about the house. Strange noises could be heard in the night, and objects seemed to move on their own. Sarah, who was always the curious one, began to investigate the strange occurrences. She started by researching the history of the house and the previous owners. One day, while exploring the nearby woods, Sarah came across a strange old woman who lived in a small cabin. The woman's name was Agatha, and she seemed to know more about the house than she let on. Agatha warned Sarah about the house's dark history, about how the previous owners had all met tragic ends. But Sarah didn't believe her. She thought Agatha was just a lonely old woman trying to scare her. As the days passed, the strange occurrences in the house became more frequent and intense. Sarah began to have vivid nightmares about the previous owners, and she started to feel like she was being watched. John and Emily didn't seem to notice anything out of the ordinary, but Sarah knew that something was wrong. One night, while everyone was asleep, Sarah heard a strange whispering in her ear. She sat up in bed, heart racing, and looked around the room. There was no one there. But then she heard it again, louder this time. She got out of bed and followed the sound, which led her to the attic. She opened the door and gasped in horror. There, in the center of the room, was a small child's playpen. It was empty, but Sarah could feel a sense of dread and foreboding emanating from it. She knew that this was where the previous owner's child had died, and that the house was haunted by his spirit. But as she turned to leave the attic, she heard footsteps behind her. She spun around, but there was no one there. Sarah's heart raced as she slowly backed away from the playpen. She was convinced that the footsteps she heard were not just her imagination. Suddenly, she heard a baby's cry coming from behind her. She whipped around, but there was still nobody there. The next morning, Sarah tried to tell her parents about what had happened, but they just brushed it off as a bad dream. However, Sarah knew that what she had experienced was real. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her every move, and she felt like she was slowly losing her mind. As the days passed, the haunting escalated. The family started to see shadows moving in the corners of their eyes, and they heard unexplained noises throughout the house. Emily tried to rationalize the occurrences, but deep down, she too felt like something was not right. One night, John woke up to find his daughter standing at the foot of his bed, staring at him with empty eyes. She was muttering something incoherent, and he couldn't understand what she was saying. He tried to shake her awake, but she wouldn't budge. After a few minutes, Sarah snapped out of it and fell back asleep. John was deeply disturbed by the experience, but he didn't know what to do. The next day, Emily decided to take matters into her own hands. She went to the library and started researching the history of the house and the surrounding area. What she found made her blood run cold. The house had been built on the site of an old asylum, and there were rumors of patients being mistreated and abused. It was said that the spirits of those patients still haunted the land. Emily immediately called a paranormal investigator who came to the house and conducted an investigation. The investigator found evidence of ghostly activity throughout the house, including cold spots, orbs, and even apparitions. But the most chilling discovery was made in the attic. In the same spot where Sarah had heard the footsteps, the investigator found a small, old doll that seemed to be emanating a strong energy. The doll was believed to be a conduit for the evil spirits that had been haunting the family. The investigator advised the family to leave the house immediately and cleanse it of any negative energy. But Sarah refused to leave. She had become obsessed with finding out more about the spirits that were tormenting her family. She started to conduct her own research and eventually found out the truth about the house's dark past. It turned out that the previous owners had been conducting a seance in the attic when their child died, and they had unknowingly summoned an evil spirit that had been trapped in the house ever since. Sarah knew that she had to put an end to the haunting, once and for all. She went to the attic, armed with a cross and a rosary, and confronted the evil spirit. In a terrifying showdown, Sarah managed to banish the spirit from the house, but not before it revealed its true identity. It turned out that the evil spirit was none other than the ghost of Sarah's deceased brother, who had been trying to communicate with his family from beyond the grave. After the shocking revelation that the evil spirit was actually her deceased brother, Sarah was left reeling. She couldn't believe that the spirit that had been haunting her family for months was actually her brother, whom she had loved and lost. In the days that followed, Sarah struggled to come to terms with what had happened. She knew that she had banished the spirit, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she had lost her brother all over again. She started to feel guilty for not recognizing him sooner and for allowing the evil spirit to torment her family. Determined to make things right, Sarah decided to hold a seance in the attic. She invited a medium to help her communicate with her brother's spirit and try to make amends. As they sat in a circle, holding hands, the medium began to chant and call out to the spirit world. Suddenly, the temperature in the room dropped, and a cold breeze swept through. The medium's eyes rolled back into her head, and she started to speak in a low, guttural voice. Sarah listened intently as the medium relayed messages from her brother's spirit. Through the medium, Sarah's brother revealed that he had never wanted to hurt their family. He had been trying to reach out to them, to let them know that he was still with them. He had been trapped in the house ever since his death, unable to move on. Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she listened to her brother's words. She realized that she had been so consumed by fear and paranoia that she had missed the signs that her brother was trying to communicate with her. She vowed to never let fear cloud her judgment again and to always listen to her instincts. After the seance, Sarah and her family decided to move out of the house. They knew that they could never fully shake off the memories of what had happened there. But Sarah made sure to take the old doll with her. She felt that it was a symbol of her brother's presence and a reminder of the lessons she had learned. Years later, Sarah and her family visited the old house. They found that it had been torn down and replaced by a park. As they walked through the park, Sarah felt a sense of peace and closure. She knew that her brother's spirit was finally at rest, and that they had all moved on from the haunting that had once plagued them. Thank you for listening to this bedtime story, and remember, if you struggle with falling or staying asleep at night, click on the first link in the description for the ultimate solution to your problem. Now, choose one of these two videos and continue on our journey in the world of bedtime stories.